In 1948, a change in South Africa's political landscape led to profound changes in society. Racism was already a great problem there, but under the dominant Afrikaner Party, a racially based caste system was actually written into law. In 1948, a new South African government takes shape under the Nationalist and Afrikaner parties. Apartheid, or separateness, divides the people into three classes: whites of European ancestry, colored people of mixed or Asian ancestry, and Africans. Africans refused to work out of protest, and many of the country's businesses shut down. Riots soon break out over the unfair treatment and the law requiring Africans in towns like Sharpville to carry passes at all times. Police wound many of the rioters, attracting international attention. Despite South African protest, the United Nations puts the issue before its committee. It is vigorously condemned, but to little effect. With this so-called separateness comes a large gap in equality, justified by racial superiority. Coming just 3 years after the close of the chilling Nuremberg trials in Germany, it's a potent reminder of the endurance of human prejudice. In the United States, racism was also a deeply rooted problem. Blacks who were denied basic rights found fighting the entrenched power structure of their own government to be a monumental task. Across the Atlantic Ocean, an army of peaceful protesters marches against another form of apartheid, segregation. In the southern United States, racism is entrenched in every aspect of political and civic life. The struggle for equality seems hampered at every level. Local sheriffs, governors, and senators are as desperate to preserve their segregated way of life as the marchers who are to change it. But after their violent opposition to black protesters in Selma, Alabama, the sympathy and support of whites and blacks across the nation is with the marchers. Dr. Martin Luther King organizes another march on Selma to register its black citizens to vote. And then another march is led from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, a well-known stronghold of segregation. The marchers are tense as they approach a cordon of police armed with billy clubs. The troopers are under orders to keep the marchers from passing over the bridge into Montgomery. They come to a halt just feet from the police, and in this volatile moment, Dr. King asks the troopers for a chance to pray. It's decided that they will abide by Montgomery's ban on marching and return to Selma. Some of the marchers feel disappointed, but unknown to them, King is waiting on an appeal in federal court to overturn the ban. 9 days later, he will get it and march into Montgomery. King knows that victory can only be gained by bringing federal power to bear upon the Southern power structure. The extent of racism in state government is evident in 1963, as Governor George Wallace stands defiantly in the doorway of the University of Alabama, physically barring entry to black students. National Guard troops finally remove the governor, and the students are permitted to enter. These are the last desperate efforts of Southerners trying to resuscitate a doomed way of life. In August of 1963, on the centennial of Lincoln's emancipation of the slaves, the entire nation's attention is focused on the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King stages a march on America's capital, Washington, D.C. Hundreds of thousands of marchers assemble on the Mall under the gaze of the emancipator himself, Abraham Lincoln. The monument is symbolic, but so is the city itself, Washington, the sleeping giant that's finally waking up to the ugly reality of racism in its own house. Politicians have been slow to act, knowing that any Southern support they enjoy will quickly evaporate with an endorsement of civil rights. But with the whole nation watching the protesters on television, the pressure is on the waffling politicians, and civil rights leaders will not abide any political compromise with the South. When Dr. King takes the podium before the crowd, and indeed before the nation, he transforms the steps of the Lincoln Monument into a pulpit.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
His sermon is a poignant and righteous one, a dream of an America that will finally live up to its creed of equality. The long march seems to have brought him finally to this place, to lay down his grievances before the very men entrusted with upholding the Constitution. For some frustrated blacks, it's an old refrain lacking a call to action. But for many whites and politicians, this is their first exposure to the message of King's movement, an appeal to humanity's highest virtues. Shortly thereafter, President Kennedy's Civil Rights Bill is killed in Congress by a Southern filibuster. And later in 1963, the president himself is assassinated in Dallas. But the dream does not die with Kennedy. At least one other man in Washington was listening to King's words on the Mall that day, the new president, Lyndon B. Johnson.
I'm here today to say I need your help. I cannot bear this burden alone. I need the help of all Americans in all America.
By 1964, Johnson is pushing his own sweeping civil rights bill through the Congress. But the Old South is not going away quietly. Members of the Old Guard, like Senator Richard Russell of Georgia, stage a filibuster to stave off the vote.
We have lost the battle, of course, but we are not yet ready to surrender in our opposition to this bill, which we feel is a perversion of the American way of life and a great blow at the right of dominion over private property that has been the genesis of our greatness.
Despite these efforts, the Civil Rights Bill passes and becomes law. Adopting the battle cry of the marchers, Johnson stands before Congress and declares, "We shall overcome." At a celebration ceremony, Johnson signs the bill with 50 pens and presents one to Dr. King.